Evan's life had been turned upside down after his divorce. He found himself at a crossroads, unsure of where to go or what to do. The city life, once familiar, now felt stifling and lonely. Seeking solace, he moved to a small town in Alabama, Chatham. It wasn't just the town that felt different, it was the house he moved into. A house that had been in his family for generations. It belonged to his grandfather, who had passed away a few years ago, leaving the house behind. The house sat on 10 acres of land, surrounded by dense woods, isolated from the town. It was quiet. Too quiet. A stark contrast to the noise and chaos of his previous life. Evan thought he'd enjoy the peace. He imagined long nights on the porch, watching the stars, and long days exploring the woods. But the house was old, and it carried with it a certain weight. Creaky wooden floors, doors that stuck, and an unshakable chill that no amount of heat could drive away. Despite its charm, it felt like it was hiding something. The first few days were peaceful. Evan unpacked his belongings, cleaned up the house, and spent time sitting on the porch with a beer in hand, watching the wind blow through the trees. The air was fresh, and the only sounds were those of nature, the occasional owl hooting, the rustle of leaves, and the far-off howl of a coyote. It felt like a perfect place to start over, the kind of place where one could heal. But slowly, things began to change. It was the 7th night when Evan first heard it. He had just gotten into bed around midnight, the hum of the ceiling fan the only sound in the room. He was almost asleep when he heard it, a low, broken whistling tune. The melody was off-key, irregular. Not a song Evan recognized, just a slow, eerie tune drifting through the window. It sounded like someone walking through the woods, whistling as they went. Evan sat up in bed, trying to make sense of it. He couldn't see anything from his window, just the dark expanse of trees. It was probably nothing, just some hunter or a drunk neighbor, he reasoned. But the hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and his heart raced in a way that made him feel like he wasn't alone. The sound stopped, and Evan tried to brush it off, telling himself it was just the wind, or maybe a bird or an animal. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but the feeling of unease lingered. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same broken tune. But this time it felt different. It was closer. Much closer. The whistling seemed to come from the backyard, near the woods, but it was sharper, louder. Evan couldn't ignore it now. He got out of bed, his body tense, his heart pounding in his chest. He turned on the porch light, but it was too dim to see clearly. The yard was empty. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside, shining it across the yard, scanning the dark corners. He expected to see someone lurking in the shadows, but there was nothing. No footprints. No rustling in the trees. Nothing. He stood there for a moment, listening, but all he could hear was the faint sound of the whistling drifting deeper into the woods. The chill of the night air seeped into his bones, and Evan couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. He went back inside, locked the door, and stayed up late, staring at the window, waiting for the sound to come again. But it didn't. At least not that night. As the days passed, the whistling became a nightly ritual. Every evening, at exactly 1:15 a.m., it started. Evan tried to ignore it, tried to go to sleep, but it was impossible. The sound was always there, waiting for him. Each night, it seemed to come closer. Sometimes it was by the shed, sometimes near the back door, sometimes just outside his window. But it was always there, and it was always at the same time. Evan began to feel like he was being hunted. Like whatever it was out there, it was getting closer, and it was waiting for him to make a move. He started to question his own sanity. Was he hearing things? Was it all just in his head? Or was there something, someone, out there in those woods? After several nights of restless sleep, Evan finally called the sheriff's office. He was desperate for answers. An older deputy, whom Evan would later call Deputy H, came out to check things out. Deputy H had been in law enforcement for years, and when Evan told him about the whistling, the deputy grew quiet. "Your granddaddy used to call us about the same thing," Deputy H said, his voice dropping slightly. "Said someone was whistling around the property late at night, always in the spring. We never found anything. I figured he was just getting old, but now you're hearing it too." Evan's heart dropped. His grandfather had dealt with this same thing. He had never mentioned it to Evan before, and now it was happening to him. Deputy H gave him a stern warning to stay inside after dark, lock the doors, and keep an eye out. He also mentioned that the sheriff's office had never been able to find the source of the whistling. That was all Evan needed to hear. He immediately started taking extra precautions. He double-checked the locks, made sure the windows were secure, and stayed inside after sunset. But the whistling didn't stop. If anything, it became worse. One night, the whistling came from a new place, the crawl space under the house. Evan could hear the sound, faint at first, but growing louder. It was like someone was whistling from beneath the floorboards, the sound traveling up through the vents and filling the room. Evan's heart raced. This was no longer just a noise from the woods, it was inside the house. Something, or someone, was under the house, moving in the dark. Evan didn't sleep that night. Instead, he spent hours lying awake in his bed, listening to the whispers of the wind outside and the occasional creak of the house settling. But the whistling was still there, and it was getting louder. The next day, Evan decided to dig through the attic, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain what was happening. He came across a box filled with his grandfather's old journals. As he flipped through the pages, he found entries that mirrored his own experience. His grandfather had heard the same whistling year after year, every spring, when he lived alone. The journal entries described his grandfather's growing fear. There were mentions of sitting up late at night, rifle in hand, waiting for the person or thing that was stalking the house. The journal also mentioned that his grandfather had never figured out who or what it was. But there was one entry that sent chills down Evan's spine. His grandfather had written, "I know it's not just my imagination. It's real, and it's coming closer every year." Evan couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over him. That night, he stayed up, shotgun in hand, waiting for the whistling to begin. He could feel his heartbeat in his chest, and every minute seemed to drag on. At exactly 1:17 a.m., the whistling began, but this time, it was different. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the hallway, inside the house. Evan froze, his breath caught in his throat. The sound moved closer, step by step, until it was right outside his bedroom door. Evan stood up, aiming the shotgun in the direction of the noise, his body tense, his mind racing. "Who's there?" Evan shouted, his voice shaking with fear. The whistling stopped. The house fell silent, the only sound the rapid pounding of Evan's heart. He flipped on the light, but the hallway was empty. No one was there. He was alone. But Evan wasn't sure if he was relieved or more terrified. Something, or someone, had been in the house with him. It felt real. It wasn't just some trick of the mind. 2 days passed in eerie silence. But then, on the third night, the knocking started. Slow, deliberate knocks on the back door. The same pattern. 3 knocks, then silence. The sound of footsteps followed, and then the floorboards creaked as someone walked down the hallway. Evan grabbed his shotgun again, his hands shaking. He stepped into the hallway, the darkness swallowing him whole. And there, at the end of the hallway, was a figure, a shadow in the dark, standing perfectly still, watching him. Evan screamed, "Don't move!" His voice cracked, and his hand trembled as he aimed the shotgun at the figure. The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, its gaze locked on Evan. Then, it slowly started to turn, like it was about to flee. Evan fired the shotgun into the darkness, hoping to stop whatever, or whoever, this was. But by the time he ran outside, the figure was gone. The front door was wide open, confirming that whoever it was had a key to the house. The next morning, Deputy H came by again. The door had been left open once more. Deputy H suggested Evan change the locks immediately and, off the record, advised him to leave the house. Someone out there in those woods was watching him, and it had been for years. Evan didn't hesitate. He changed the locks and left the house that day, moving to his parents' place out of state. He never returned to the old house again. But the question remained, who had been stalking him and his grandfather all these years? And how had they gotten a key? Evan may never know the full truth, but the memories of that house, of the whistling and the dark figure that watched him, would stay with him forever.